Good morning, Year 12. Welcome back to your lessons on theory. We are halfway through theory and methods at the moment, so we need to move on to looking at another section. So modernity and postmodernism. So it comes up quite a lot, postmodernism in particular, postmodernist perspective in the education system. We look at it in crime. We've looked at it in family. So what actually is it? So we're branching away now from looking at our structural and our social action perspectives, and we're moving a little bit further. So what is this moment that we're in right now? What is this part of society? So our goal then, like everything, I'm getting you to plan and write so many questions so that you are feeling quite prepped when it comes to the real thing and you feel like you've got plans on everything. That's my goal. So applying from item C, again, evaluate the claim that society has entered into a postmodern age. So postmodernism is essentially how we have improved, there isn't really a sense of reality anymore. So it's quite easy to get it mixed up with social action. And we'll go on to have a look at that in a minute. So that'll be your homework for this week. So we'll start with modernity then. So what is modernity? So we've started with looking at, so we've looked at different areas of society. Modern society emerged in sort of the late 18th century. Sometimes it's called the Enlightenment. The key focused on science, rational thought, and reason. And modernists, they have a strong belief in progress. So it's all about being objective and being scientific. So applying science to society will show us social progress, inevitably. It's all about objective knowledge. It's desirable, it's measurable, and it can give us a good insight into the here and the now. And basically, our modernists believe that they can take some scientific methodology, so scientific methods like, experiments and like questionnaires, are things our positivists really value, and apply that to the study of society to tell us why we have these changes and what's brought about society changing so rapidly. So it's quite an optimistic view of the future, using science to give us an idea of where we're going. Okay, so that's this idea of modernity. Our key features of modernity then, so capitalism is a massive feature. Lots of modern societies base their, or it has a capitalist structure. So privately owned businesses, all about production. It's unequal, the bourgeoisie, proletariat. So it's it's quite a Marxist feature within modernity. Social class is a key feature here. So how people identify themselves or their own self-concept is based on the class in which they fit. So the capitalist ruling class owning the factories, the middle class managing them, and the working class working in them. Okay, and that's still reproduced in quite a lot of societies today. Urbanisation. So because of industrialisation, because we have more space, more land, we've got mass migration, more jobs to urban people moving to urban centres. We've got more individuals mixing and more multiculturalism. Science and technology, because modernity is all about science. Science is replacing, and you'll look at this with Sir and beliefs in societies, but it's replacing religion. So we have this secularism, where basically religion is becoming, well, not many people are believing in religion anymore. Although I read a really interesting article that was it 1 in 4? It was an article posted by The Guardian, I think. In this crisis, in this pandemic, are turning to religion, are praying, are watching more sort of services put out by different religions, which is quite interesting. So in times of crisis, people are are turning to religion for comfort. Science dominating, so it replaces religion. Rational thought and technology and globalization pushes this forward. So our rational thinking becomes more important than sort of religion, as it were. And then our meta-narratives. So our grand narratives are our Marxism, are our functionalism, and they are ways that try to organise how society works. Okay, so they are modern perspectives. So in terms of modernity, Marxism and functionalism are kind of key players in that. So those meta-narratives developed how society works, okay? Because you can see some of the key features here relate quite nicely with those two theories. So post-modernity or postmodernism is a move. So we're progressing from modernity to postmodernism. And there's a massive debate as to whether we are still in modernity, if we are in an extension or late modernity, which we'll look at, or if we are in a postmodern society. So our postmodernists are saying that society is constantly changing. And our modernist theories, our grand meta-narratives, like functionalism and Marxism, can't keep up. And they don't really provide good explanations of society anymore. I don't know if you agree with that or if you think that's true, but if we think of some of the limitations of functionalism and Marxism, they are quite outdated. They aren't really necessarily that relevant. Obviously, neo-Marx tried to push that forward and take elements of it, but this is what a postmodernists argue, that it doesn't explain it anymore. And we looked at this in social action, globalisation, and consumer culture. So people being more interconnected. You know, the fact that we know what's going on the other side of the world is because of globalisation, because of technology. It means that those traditional sources of identity, so how people would identify themselves through gender, ethnicity, religion, are becoming quite irrelevant. And things like the family and people's work are disintegrating because nobody really stays in one job forever like they used to, probably in an early modernity, in pre-modernity. And the family looks so different, as we know, it's constantly changing, that we can't really rely on those as methods of creating our identity anymore. And things like social change, so cultural shifts, people's lives are becoming more insecure and unpredictable. Look where we are right now. You know, things are constantly changing. So our identity is constantly changing. The way we do things are changing. So if we look at it from a bit of a pictorial perspective, modernity on the left, so the Enlightenment period, all about impact of science. We believe that we can answer everything. And then post-modernity, so post-World War II, past that, actually maybe we're not that great as we thought. We're starting to question authority. We're starting to, move away from religion, decline in those spiritual beliefs, and to move towards us kind of creating our own way in society and our own identities. So a little bit more on postmodernism then. So people argue that after the 1970s, we are now in a postmodern era. So after the modern age. We are starting to define ourselves less on class, gender, ethnicity, but more in terms of the goods that we buy, so that consumer culture. You know, Instagram is full of it. People posting pictures of things they've bought or like designer brands they've bought because that defines who they are now, not their gender, their class, their race. This postmodern stage, it's not a continuation of modernity, but a complete break from it. So it's a brand new theory, brand new way of looking at things, and that's kind of been disputed. Postmodernists, they don't look at the ideas of enlightenment, they don't believe science can solve everything, but they blame it. So they're blaming science and power for destroying the environment. So it is quite a pessimistic, dystopian view of the future. So it's characterized by human misery. How charming in times of Great Depression. It challenges those big meta-narratives, Marxism, functionalism. They're insufficient. They don't really talk about or describe or explain the world anymore. And things like mass media, social media, more communications means that our identity is now based on our media image. So we're more reliant on how other people view us through the media than how, those different factors view ourselves, as it were. Okay, so that's a very brief nutshell. We spoke about that. Of some of the summary. So now we need some key features. So a bit like we had the key features of modernity, what is key in postmodernism? And again, some of this I'm repeating because we'll go into a little bit more detail. So work has changed massively. So things like our manual labour jobs, our coal mining, factory work, has massively declined. And things like working in an office, schools, the government has become more dominant. So the way in which people earn their money, their living, that's massively decreased. Or some of the manual stuff has massively decreased because of globalisation. We have more technology that are taking over those roles, or some of them have just literally died out. Okay, so that is a feature of a postmodern society. So we definitely are, I think, in that. But if you think of somewhere like, in the deepest part of Africa where they still have to do those farming jobs or those more manual labour jobs, that's not a postmodern era. Okay, so it's very culturally based. Social class as an identity has declined because of the nature of work. Do we still have social class? Is it still prominent in society? Can people move up class or down class? I mean, how does that work? Postmodern societies are media saturated. It's a lovely keyword. So we are constantly being bombarded through the internet, through TV, through cinema, and that's dominated how we live our lives and how we start to define ourselves. Like we said, globalization, exposure to different brands, different icons, music, film, means we have so much choice, which is great, I guess. And postmodernists are all about choice and risk. We have a lot of choice that we can decide what we want to look at, what we want to listen to. That's great. In terms of structuring our identity, are there any limitations to that? It's all about consumption, like we've said, and the modernist meta-narrative, so science, socialism, feminism, this is saying it's lost its power. It doesn't explain how society works anymore. And people are saying, postmodernists argue that all the problems that we have are because of science. Can that be true? Can you think of any where that might be the case? And then postmodernists, last thing, they're saying that there's no such thing as truth. Everything is relative. So that's quite a social action perspective there. Things are constantly changing, and that contributes to our understanding of how society works. Okay, you look at where we are right now, we've got to try and make our way around this brand new world, as it were, this brand new way of living with social distancing and trying to make our way through the chaos. It's constantly changing. So from this to this, that's like a very brief overview. So in the modern age, a bit more structure. You knew who you were and what you were doing. And now, a lot of confusion, lack of structure, and you can create who you want to be. So part of me does think that we are here. People don't agree. Some people think that we're still here. Maybe the older people in society, but I think we're definitely in a postmodern age. So just like social action, I've attached a booklet for you to have a look at. So read the example on the key thinkers and use that in your own knowledge to develop a mind map in more detail. Include as many examples that you can think of from family and education as you can from postmodernist perspective. I've got an example for religion that you will look at in beliefs in society. Such a fantastic module, you're going to love it. really, really interesting angles in there, I think. So have a look at that, pause this, and then come back. And then we will start developing and looking a little bit more at some of those key thinkers. So it's all in that booklet there. And I should have said actually at the start, that booklet is a bit of a gap fill. So if you wanted to make all the notes first, then come back to that booklet and add some stuff in, you can definitely do that, or whatever works best for you. So postmodernist key thinkers then. We've got Bauman, which is saying that our society is in a constant change. It's unpredictable and it's marked by chaos. Woo, brilliant. I love this phrase. He referred to it as liquid modernity. So social structures like the family and class are breaking down, and postmodernists sort of laugh at the idea of a family now because we live in such a sort of creative world that there isn't really a one size fits all for family. Personal relationships have constantly changed. Some people say, like we said earlier in a couple of weeks ago, personal life perspective, their pets are part of their family, their friends are part of their family. So it's not something that's constant anymore. It's constantly changing. Foucault is, if we did health still, he's a prominent researcher in health, believes that science as a route to enlightenment is dead. So our big stories, our big meta-narratives aren't useful. We need to take a relativist position so that we don't have an overall truth, but it's true to the people who hold those views. So everybody has a view and to them it's true. But is that not going to cause a load of chaos? Shouldn't we have some universals maybe? Two key ones here, so Lyotard and Baudrillard. Lyotard, I think that's how we say his name. Lyotard? Let's go with Lyotard. Says that people are no longer believing in truth because it always changes. Society's so fragmented and there's so many different groups and interests that knowledge is equally valid. Everything that we know to be true is different to each other, and it's true to us, basically. There is a myth of what is true, what is right, what is wrong. Baudrillard has some fabulous key terms. So he uses this idea of simulacra, which says that society starts to now value style over substance. So we're buying and selling into the social media reality and lifestyles, and we're starting to, I suppose, change our ways to fit in with what images from social media are projecting to us to be reality now. So we don't really have an underlying reality. We're in a state of hyper-reality. And I think people find it difficult to distance themselves from that. We're being bombarded with images that our identity becomes destabilized. We're sort of picking, mixing and constructing who we are. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. But I do think it's a bad thing when it comes to mental health and people are seeing all these, boys and girls, projected images of the perfect figure or the perfect flawless makeup or muscles. And I think that can really hinder and impact your idea of who you are and how you define yourself. But in the same breath, it can also be quite, what's the word? I suppose comforting. So if we take someone like Sam Smith, who identifies as they, so he's sort of gender neutral. People who are feeling that way can relate to him, and that makes them feel quite comfortable with who they are. So I think there are strengths and weaknesses to postmodernism. To our family then, so going back to bringing in those synoptic links, we don't really have much of a nuclear family anymore, single parent, reconstituted, ethnic diversity. This is because of a postmodern era, so there isn't a fixed norm as to who you need to be with, how many kids you should have, 2.4 children, all the rest of it. It's constructed by you. And there are obviously strengths and weaknesses to postmodernism. I quite like it as a perspective, but people start to argue, so some researchers have argued that actually we're in a state of late modernity. So they're saying that today's changes are not the dawn of a new era, but a continuation of modern society. So we think about what makes up modernity, those traditional values. A late modernity is saying it's just an extension. So we're now in late or high modernity. And what that means is that the changes that have always been there in a modern society have kind of gone into overdrive. So people are still searching for knowledge and answers. And some of those key features of modernity still exist. So religion is still prominent in some areas of the world, some parts of England, as you'll look at, and family structures. And what these two key researchers, so we've looked at Giddens already and structuration. Beck, one of our key researchers here, says that we are now actually facing a load of risks that have come from this development of modernity. So environmental harm would be one of them. And he says that all of this results from technology. So things like fraud, credit card fraud, cybercrime, environmental harm, these are manufactured risks that have developed from technology. So modern society are facing these modern dangers. Okay, see if you can think of any others. What are some new harms to us that haven't been there before? And then Giddens, so tradition and custom don't tell us how we should act anymore. So we have a whole different layout, a whole different structure of who we are, which means that obviously the consequences of that are things like there aren't any jobs for life anymore. People are constantly changing their jobs. Geographical mobility, people are moving away from their hometowns to go and venture for better jobs. So we're continually reevaluating our ideas, which means that cultures become unstable. So do we still have cultures, or are they sort of mixed and constantly integrated? Is there still a set culture for different religions and different people? I feel like we are slowly sort of moving away from that. So postmodernism, why is it good? So it's tried to interpret the new social and cultural changes that have happened, multiculturalism. It's attempted to analyse the growing impact on the media. It's challenged the old meta-narratives, the fact that they're outdated. And it sees us having a really important role in creating who we are. We have so many choices, and consumerism has helped us to decide who we are. But look at all those weaknesses. It's confusing. Postmodernism is confusing because they all emphasise different aspects. You've got, Beck talking about environmental change. You've got Folkart there, Baudrillard, Lyotard. They're all emphasising something different. It doesn't recognise the constraints on individuals, that still exist on gender, ethnicity, race. It overplays the role of the media and says that we're really passive and we just, look at pictures of Kim Kardashian and oh my God, we instantly have to look like her. Well, we all have our own minds. We're all independent. Marxists say that it ignores power. Poverty prevents many from freely constructing their identity. So we still have people who are poorer in society, and what impact is it going to have on them? It's so pessimistic. It kind of underplays the role of science, which surely has a really important role to play. And social class. So I said that maybe we're moving away from it, but there's evidence to say that actually it's still a really important source of identity. I don't know if it is, to be fair. Something to have a look at. How important is social class to people? I'm not sure. So you can spend a bit of time. It's like a very brief help for the essay. Link it back to some examples, maybe make a little plan for this section and then go away and write it. I do want to see a plan, 5-minute plan. Try and time it, so 30 minutes. Maybe use a different colour for where you had to go over, if you've had to go over. So really think about it. It is quite difficult, so spend a bit of time making sure you fully understand it. I've uploaded the textbook pages as well, so have a read through that as well. Don't just jump into it and come out with, a measly grade that doesn't reflect your best work. I've got an extension activity there if you want to have a look at, and a couple more questions. So this is a section that they love because it is quite confusing. So do as much time planning as you possibly can, so it will really benefit you in the long run.